Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Kane Audio VLOG. Another episode of the Ask Me Anything series. So here we go. Apologies for not answering all the questions last week. If we've got time today, I might go back to some of those. However, last week's questions, let's just dive straight in. Right. Again, I've just got the video in front of me and I'm going to have a look. Music Speaks. Hello. Hey Dom, thanks for the reply. Sorry if I'm not explaining it very well. I was struggling with my own track to get that build of excitement. It all just seemed to stay on one level throughout, if you know what I mean. Since I last commented, I bought your Sonic Academy tutorial for structures, which really helped me a lot. Cool. Cheers for that. I don't remember the original question, if I'm honest, but in terms of building excitement, yeah, I think in the Sonic Academy thing I mentioned how I sort of, I mean, there's a couple of different tricks you can do to sort of build excitement when it comes to things like a build up and a drop. There's again a couple extra things you can do. So for example, slowly, if your breakdown is, say, a minute long, over that minute you can bring down levels of certain things just by, say, 2 or 3 dB over the minute, so that when everything comes back in, it goes back up 2 or 3 dB and seems like it sort of kicks louder and harder. And then you can do the almost the total opposite of a drop, which is something you'll notice I do in some of my music, because I don't like just big explosive drops for no reason, is to sort of hold that tension and just use silence. And I think, in fact, do you know what? One of the biggest production tips I can ever give is use silence. Silence is your friend. Not every part of the track has to be filled with sound. Saint Nicholas. Wow, we got Father Christmas here. MySpace, cool, you're going back a bit. Yeah. Zombo, do you gym, bro? Also, how is all of your gear set up, including your analog synths? Do I gym? Ironically, yes. But not like a bro gyms. So, I'm getting old and I figured I needed to start trying to sort of maintain some fitness. I'm not very good. I love real exercise, like I'll play tennis, I'll hike up a mountain. I love outdoors stuff like kayaking or all sorts of outdoor sports, but I hate the gym. And obviously because of my job, I don't get much time to get, well, outside the studio, let alone outdoor sports. So yeah, so about 6 months ago I started going to the gym, and I go about 3 times a week and I hate it. I go on the running machine for about a mile, just over, and then I just flop around with some of the other equipment. I'm just like, oh, I hate this, and then I'll just go. So yeah, kind of I do, but not properly. Tune in the hole. Oh, sorry, there was another part to that question. How is all of your gear set up, including your analog synths? I don't really understand the question, if I'm honest. It's just kind of set up, it's all plugged in. So what I have is most of my MIDI is via USB. I've got a couple of synths that don't do USB MIDI, and in that case I have 5-pin DIN to USB converters. You can get them on Amazon for about £20, something like that, I think. They're worth having. Yeah, so pretty much everything is MIDI triggered via USB. Audio wise, I've got an ADDA expansion for this, so it's all the lines in. I don't know if you can see the very bottom one on the rack there. Basically has a bunch of XLRs and jacks in, and you can see the patch bay with a bunch of wires coming out, so I can just plug everything in and reroute it into the analog to digital converter, and then it goes from there via optical cables into the back of my ID22, and that's it. Tune in the hole. Hello Dom, I watched your mixdown session and I have a question. How do I prepare my stems for mixing? I know you prefer them to be 24-bit WAV files with -10 dB, but what I mean is, do I make a stem from every track, even from return tracks or tracks with effects, EQs, reverbs? Let's imagine I have a project in Ableton where I have a drum group with a glue compressor on it, and in this group I have a kick drum with no effects on it, and then a snare with a reverb on it. How do I make stems for mixing in this case? Do I turn off the compressor or the reverb? And by the way, I really think you should do a video about how to make a Skrillex bass. Yeah, that's a good question, and in fact it's one that quite often when I have a mixdown client they'll ask about that. So there's no real right or wrong answer there. Yes, I ask for 24-bit 48K WAV just so that I've got the headroom to play, and I ask for all the stems to peak no higher. Well, I say -10 dB. I don't mind if it goes to -6 or even -3 really. I mean, digital is digital, so you know, you're not losing anything. It's just better to have more headroom to play. And then I would suggest, as a mix engineer, what I want to receive is stems that when I load them up in my project file, I want to be able to hit play and hear the track exactly as you left it, basically. So if we're talking things like reverb, EQs, stuff like that on various channels, could be synths, could be drums, whatever. So like you mentioned the snare with reverb, leave that on, because I don't know if you want reverb on a snare. I can't possibly know what you want your snare to sound like. All I can work out is, does this snare fit inside the track? And that's a very different question, because that's an objective thing, whereas reverb would be more subjective most of the time. However, you mention if you had a group and you had glue compressor, I would say probably take that glue compressor off and send me the stems, the drum stems, separately, because something like compression and gluing the drums together is something a mix engineer should do if they feel that it needs doing. And in fact, very often I would say, if you're using a glue compressor on a drum group, you've probably done something wrong already. Like your kick drum might be too loud or too quiet, or your kick drum might be too extended or too short, or something there. For you to use the glue compressor or any compressor in your drum group, there must already be something that isn't quite sitting right, because why have you used that compressor? What's that compressor there for? So yeah, I would say get rid of that compressor. And also, I mean, in a general kind of changing the subject a bit, but going back to compression, I don't really use compressors in my productions. I'll use it in a final mixdown sometimes, but even then, not very often. It's only if somebody asks for a particular style, like they want the drums to really pump like an 80s synth wave track or something like that, then obviously I'll use compressors to manipulate that. But yeah, generally for my own productions especially, I don't use compressors. I don't see the need for compressors. I always think if you need something to sound louder, turn it up. If you need something to punch through better, then change the instrument. Find something that punches through better without having to resort to a compressor. So there we go, there's my 2 cents on compression. Andy Ruiz, thanks for answering my question, Dom. It really did help. You're welcome. I like how you mentioned that you used to second guess pursuing music stuff, but then you listen to a track and remember that is why it's really worth it. I have felt that lots of times, so happy you recognise my name. You're welcome. I have another question if you don't mind. Can you remember when and where you met other Mau5trap artists, like in person? No, and most of them I haven't met in person. I'm a bit of a recluse. As I mentioned earlier on about the sports thing, I don't really get out of the studio very much. And yeah, so I've not met many of the Mau5trap artists. I've met a few, and they've been various places, usually unrelated. It's usually been through friend of a friend or whatever, and usually I guess I meet most DJs and producers at my own gigs. Yeah, I don't I'm not much of a party person in general. As much as I love performing at parties, I don't tend to party much anymore myself. I had the honour of meeting Monster Get Down. Yeah, Charlie's a lovely guy. When he played here in Arizona in February, and we talked about a lot of music stuff, which was a dream come true. Hope I can meet you someday as well. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'm always up for meeting people, especially if it's in Arizona. Matt Gordon, automation is different on different doors. Okay. I'm guessing there was a question last week that was, can I do a video tutorial on automation? Well, automation isn't really that different on different doors when it comes to the basics, at least, because if you want the level to go up, you automate the line to go up. It's not much more than that. So I still don't understand. Finn Fighter again. Thanks for the reply, that was really helpful. You're welcome. Kavalev, Dom, thanks for the detailed answer. I'm also quite mischievously pleased to have been the one to have taken you over the 20 minutes, although the altruistic reason for the response was gold. Okay, can't remember what it was, but cheers. Distorts, hey Dom, since you're doing this full time, how do you manage the amount of hours spent in the studio on a daily basis? Do you try to work on a schedule or just when you feel like it? And how do you keep yourself motivated to jump back in the studio if perhaps sometimes you don't feel in the mood, but know you have to be productive and keep working on music to actually get things done? Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks, I'm loving the AMA so far. I'm really hoping I'll continue to be an ongoing series, so I can keep sending questions your way over time. Greetings from Guatemala. Awesome. So, how do you manage the amount of hours spent in the studio on a daily basis? I don't. Look, I mean, I've been self-employed full-time in the music industry for coming up to 15 years now, and at the beginning it was mostly through DJing and production, so there was a lot of touring involved, everything was all over the place, there was a lot of partying involved, a hell of a lot of airports involved, and it was just a lot of hard work, and that I just found you just do it, you just go with it. It's not too difficult. I mean, it's well, you don't have a choice when you're gigging a lot on what time you wake up. You wake up when you have to go catch your flight, basically. However, over the last 5, 6, 7 years I've sort of cut back on the DJing and worked more on the studio and sort of getting a bit more sort of security in daily stuff. So I try and keep my hours Monday to Friday 9 to 5. So I'm usually in here by 8:30 in the morning, and I aim to leave by 5 p.m. In terms of motivation, there are two big motivations, and they're going to be really obvious. The first one, I love my job. I love nerding out over synths. That's good enough motivation. Second motivation, I got bills to pay and mouths to feed. So, you know, that the hunger, I suppose. Interestingly, before I got self-employed, before I took the leap of quitting my day job and doing this full time, I had a pretty good job, pretty good money, nice car, nice house, all of that. Nothing spectacular, but I was doing all right, especially for my age. And I was talking to someone, and I was kind of moaning-ish about how I wanted to be in the music industry, and I wasn't feeling I was getting to be able to do it. And the guy turned around and was like, well, you can't have your cake and eat it. Simple as that. If you want to get into the music industry, you're going to have to sacrifice something. You know, you can't have expensive monthly payments on a car and a house and whatever else. If you want to become self-employed at the beginning, you need to be living in a basement somewhere eating beans on toast or whatever. And that's pretty much what I did. You know, when I eventually did become self-employed, I sort of took that mentality of, I'm going to just cut down everything in my life as much as I can, and I'm going to see how long this will last. I got made redundant from my day job, and I figured, because I had a little pay packet to finish me off, and I figured I could live as I normally did at the time for 3 months off that money, not very long, or if I really squeezed things, I could probably live for 6 months, and I'll see how long I can last. And that was nearly 15 years ago. You know, it's been a long haul, it's a long journey, but you kind of get to a point where work is work, and you just get up and you do whatever work you can. And yeah, so I think managing hours and studio time and stuff is pretty easy, I suppose. And I try to sort of make sure that the people I work with are professional people as well. So, you know, I tend to work a lot with companies. And yeah, you know, sometimes I can be here till 3 o'clock in the morning working on a project, but that's usually because I want to be, not because I have to be. So yeah, I think, you know, in this day and age, you've got to be professional when you're being self-employed in anything. And, you know, the music industry is no different. As much as you'll see, probably on YouTube, you'll see plenty of other producers and DJs who are living the life and who've got sexy women in cars and whatever. You know, that's not really how it is, to be honest. Even for those guys who like to think that it is, you know, you see all these guys at the top with private jets with their name written down the side. Well, they've just hired that for the day, and they've got someone to print a cheap sticker to stick their name down the side. You know, none of those private jets are actually owned. I think I know of 1, maybe 2 DJs who actually own a private jet. All the rest are rented, which anyone can do. You know. Yeah, so I don't even know where I was going with that. So yeah, so scheduling, yes, I try and work on a schedule 9 to 5, Monday to Friday if I can, because I like to try and have a bit of a life outside. It doesn't always happen. So yeah, keeping me motivated, jump back in the studio. Well, I love my job, so it's pretty easy. Monday morning, I'm up for it. Perhaps sometimes you don't feel in the mood. Yeah, sometimes I don't feel in the mood. I think that's the same with everyone. We all get bored, or we all feel a bit down, or we all just don't have the energy. And when it comes to stuff like that, I kind of figured, well, being self-employed, there's always something to do, whether it be scheduling a few social media posts, or pitching for a new job in a couple of months' time, or speaking to somebody about a collaboration, or listening to what else is out there. So yeah, there's always stuff you can be doing. So I don't find I'm ever not busy. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, loving the AMO so far. Hopefully it'll continue as an ongoing series. Yeah, that'd be great. John Bloomfield. Hi Dom. Thanks for answering my questions from last time. I have more. 1. In Bitwig, I seem to get really bad latency to my Moog Sub 37. I know you've said in the past to leave it in. Oh, I think this got answered when I saw the comment pop up. Yeah, oh, actually I answered it. So I was talking about latency amounts. It depends on your computer settings. It depends a lot on things like your CPU and your graphics card and your wiring. And in fact, they came back, interestingly. Hi Dom, switched from MIDI to USB connection to the Moog, and the latency seems much better now. So he went from 5-pin MIDI to USB, which is interesting. I didn't realise there'd be a latency difference on that. If anything, I would have thought it'd be the other way around, because usually, from my own experience, the 5-pin MIDI is a bit faster and a bit more stable than USB. Either way, problem solved, so that's cool. I think there was a part 2 to that question too. Yeah, I asked about sending demos to labels last time. My main concern was that if you sent a completely finished mastered track, the label could steal it. Oh, that's an interesting one, yeah, and I think I answered that in the comments, but my answer was along the lines of, if you're sending a fully finished mastered track to a label as a demo, and you think that that label might steal your track, then you shouldn't be sending demos to that label. Whoever that label is, why would they steal it? So I don't fully understand that. I mean, you know, and even if they did steal it, you've got the project file and all the original samples and recordings and whatever on your computer, so you've got all the proof you need to show that you made that track and that you sent them that track as a demo. And in fact, most of you will probably remember very recently there was that one DJ. I would happily say his name, to be honest, but I can't remember it. It's someone I've never heard of, but apparently he's super famous in the tech house scene or whatever, which is not my thing. And he was blatantly just getting people's demos sent in and then claiming them as his own, and then I think he put out some video trying to prove that he wrote the track in the first place, but you could tell that it didn't really sound like the track that got released, and he'd obviously tried recreating it in that moment. You know, there's going to be people like that everywhere in the world. It's certainly not just the music industry. So, you know, don't send it to people like that, basically. You know, send your tracks to people that you respect. And people need to earn your respect by not stealing your music. Rod Marconi. Hi Dom, seen a great tutorial you done before on white noise and layering it, etc. But I can't seem to find it again. Can you help? Many thanks. Layering white noise. Give me more information. I'm not sure that I understand what you mean. Layering white noise. Yeah, I don't know. If it's not in this vlog series, then I have no idea. Joy Dust, very interesting. Thanks. You're welcome. Yeah, and that is all the questions done. And we're at 25 minutes. So I think we've done pretty well here. I'm just going to have a very quick skim of the previous video just to see if there's anything that I desperately wanted to answer. I don't know if there was. I haven't looked. Let's have a very quick skim. Oh, that's one. Stanky Leg. Thanks for answering my previous questions, but I have another. Is Dominic Kane your real name, or is it a stage name? If it is a stage name, then how'd you come up with it? That's my name. That is my real name. So, my mum came up with it. Hey Dom, I searched your videos but couldn't find anything about compression. When you give us a good lesson about it, thanks in advance. A lot of people asking about compression. I might have to do a separate video on compression, on how I do or don't use it, because so many people get really worked into like what's a good compressor, what's a bad compressor, and all the settings on a compressor. Compression itself is not, I mean, they weren't even invented for producers. They were invented for radio broadcasters. So I don't see why everyone wants everything compressed all the time. You know, it's great for mastering, but anywhere else, I don't get it. I'll do a separate video on that, I think, and I'll hopefully go through all the details of when you should and shouldn't use one. Casey Music, talk about always exporting your stems to then mix it completely separately. The moment you transfer your final mix into your master is kind of clear to me, but at which point do you say your pre-mixed track is ready to get to the mix stage? I often have some issues dividing those two stages of music production. That's exactly the point of why I do it. So you've got creating and mixing, as in my not really worthy to call workflow. I very much catch myself mixing up those two. Yeah, so I mean, you can kind of mix it as you go, and you know, give the track a decent mix to an extent, but just don't worry about it. And I think that's the point. I heard a quote once. I may have made it up. I don't know. I'm sure I'm quoting someone, but whatever. But the quote was, art is never finished, it's only ever ready. And I kind of live by that. So you know, if you're asking when a track is finished, well, never, because there's always something you can put in. You can always put another synth in there, or another set of hi-hats, or you could take out one synth, or take out this, that and the other, and it might sound better, it might sound worse, it might not sound any different whatsoever. So I think the question you've got to ask yourself is not, is this track finished, but more, is this track ready to be heard by the public? And so that's really kind of the point for me. So I'll produce it in Bitwig, and I will keep producing until I think this is a complete track. I can listen to it from start to finish, and there's nothing that really stands out to me. So you have to try and listen to your own track as though you've never heard it before. You have to keep asking yourself, if somebody was listening to this for the first time, would that new clap have would it have surprised them? Would that, when you go into the breakdown, you've got all your track full and then it drops into the breakdown, was that transition smooth? If I'd heard this for the first time, did that just come out of nowhere? Or was there a little clue? Was there a sweeping effects, or was something filtering out or filtering in, or was there a transition between those two periods? And if I'd have heard this for the first time, would that have just scared the bejesus out of me? When you've answered all those questions and everything's fine, then your production is kind of done, I guess. And that's when you start focusing on the mix. But you want your track to sound, you know, don't tell yourself, oh, I won't worry about that because I'll just sort it out in the mix later. If, for example, your kick drums, we've hit the 30-minute marker on my camera again. Right, so I'm going to finish it off there. What was I saying? Yeah, I was saying about don't fool yourself into thinking that anything can be fixed in the mix. If, for example, your bass line is really muddy, and yeah, okay, you could fix that in the mix down usually if it's a muddy bass line, but don't, you know, fix it now. While you're making the track, it should already sound good. That way, when you get to the mix, you can really fine tune that bass line. You can really make sure that whatever the bass line is, every frequency range, or every frequency within that range is at its best energy level, whatever that may be. And I guess that's probably the way to look at it. Yeah, so it's kind of a grey area treating those two jobs separately, because your production and your mix kind of overlap, because you're kind of doing some mixing in your production, and that's okay. But there has to come a time where you say, right, there isn't anything more I can add or take away to this, or there isn't anything more I want to add or take away. And I think it's at that point where I go, right, one last listen, make sure all the transitions are in place, there's no silly mistakes, you know, there's nothing clipping or whatever. And it's at that point that I then go, right, now I'll export the stems and I'll load them up in Mixbus and start mixing. And that is how I decide. So once again, thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, I'm actually filming this on Wednesday. Yeah. I'll still upload it on Friday, and I'm actually away from tomorrow until Monday, but I'll upload this on Friday, and I will hopefully have more questions from you. As usual, please do like, comment, subscribe, all the usual stuff. Yeah, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.